When I started thinking about getting into 3D printing, I asked people what should be the very first 3D printer I get. And a lot of them said it should be an Ender 3 or an Ender 3 Pro. That's this guy here, the Ender 3 Pro. But the fact that so many people recommend the Ender 3 Pro doesn't mean that it's the best first 3D printer you should get. It just means it's a really popular one. And sometimes things that are popular because they're great, and sometimes they're popular for other reasons, and a lesser known printer like the Sovol SV01 might be more performance, better value, etc. That's the question we're going to tackle in this video today. What has the Ender 3 Pro got that makes it so freaking beloved? And does it really deserve that? I just improvised this opening, and I realized that's an enormous task to set in front of myself. Does the venerated, most popular 3D printer in existence deserve its title? I, Joshua Bardwell, with a grand total of 4 months of 3D printing experience under my belt, will tell you the answer, which no one else has done before me: no. Okay, well, I'm going to leave that intro in because it's too freaking funny not to. But with all the humility that my 4 months of 3D printing experience deserves, I'm going to tell you why I got the Ender 3 Pro and what I think about my very first experience with it, how it stacks up in printing, especially flex filament compared to the Sovol SV01, and, you know, that kind of thing. I'm Joshua Bardwell. I sure hope you learned something today. I want to start this video with an overview of the technical differences between the Ender 3 Pro and the Sovol SV01. And I got to acknowledge the Sovol SV01 was my very first 3D printer. However, I actually ordered both of these at the same time, and it just so happens that Sovol shipped first. I really knew from the beginning that I wanted to try to answer this question of whether the older design, but just the much more sort of time into it, maybe more refined design of the Ender 3 Pro would perform better or worse than this Sovol, which is less well known, but has some technical improvements compared to the Ender. So I ordered both of them at the same time. The Sovol came first. Now I've had a few, almost a month now with the Ender. Let's dig into what the differences between them are. Probably the biggest difference between the Sovol SV01 and the Ender 3 Pro is that the Ender 3 Pro has what's called a Bowden extruder. And that means that the extruder is mounted here on the Z-axis instead of on this carriage with the hot end. The advantage of that is that the moving part of the 3D printer just contains the hot end, and so it's lighter. And that means that it can move faster and stop sharper without sort of overshooting and becoming imprecise. The place where this will manifest is in sharp corners. If you have a direct drive extruder like the Sovol and you're trying to run it too fast, it will kind of overshoot the corners where it should slow down, and you can get imprecise right angles basically. With a Bowden extruder, the extruder has to push the filament through this, they call it a Bowden tube. It was invented by Mr. Bowden in 1927 when he designed his first 3D printer. It was steam powered. This is called a Bowden tube. And a Bowden tube works great with kind of semi-rigid filaments here like this PLA. You can easily push it through the tube and it doesn't crinkle up. But for flexible filaments like this TPU, you can immediately see the problem. Now, the Bowden extruder doesn't mean that you can't print flexible filaments with the Ender 3 Pro. And in fact, you can see I've got TPU running into it now. In general, it just means that you have to print slower. And this is something that I'm starting to learn about 3D printers as I get into them. That a 3D printer can probably do anything you want it to do. It's just a question of how much work, money, and time do you have to put into it. And that goes on the back end where you are literally changing out parts on the machine or upgrading them. But it also goes at print time, because you may be able to print twice as fast or 3 times as fast with one type of printer or slower with another. And that if that's the difference between 2 hours and 6 hours, well, just start it and let it run overnight and you'll never know the difference. But for really big prints, or if you're going for really high volume, the difference between 10 hours and 40 hours could be a pretty big freaking deal. So the big question that I wondered about as I started getting into 3D printing was, what do you have to give up to print flexible filament on a Bowden extruder like the Ender 3 Pro? And that's a big deal to me, as my viewers probably know, because FPV stuff is usually printed with flex filament like TPU. And I'm happy to say that I was able to get fine results with TPU on the Bowden extruder. In fact, if you take a look at these 6 benchies here, I'll bet you that you couldn't consistently tell me which one was printed on the Ender and which one was printed on the Sovol SV01, which has the direct drive extruder. And the reason for that is that any printer can do a good job if you have the right settings. And here's the thing. The Ender 3 Pro is so freaking popular that it is way easier to find someone else out there in the world who has this exact same printer who will give you a slicer profile for you to try, and almost through trial and error, you could probably find something that would get you good results. And that's something that the Sovol doesn't have going for it. Because as helpful as the folks over on the Sovol Facebook group are, and Sovol themselves, and they are super, super helpful, there just aren't as many of them as Sovol owners as there are Ender 3 Pro owners. And that counts for something. Another difference between the Ender 3 Pro and the Sovol is that the Sovol has a dual Z-axis drive. That means that there are 2 Z-axis stepper motors and 2 drive screws to carry the Sovol's Z-axis up both sides in sync. The Ender has only a single drive gear, or drive motor and drive screw, and that means that this side, you can actually see it's got quite a bit of movement. Well, some people would call that quite a bit, some people would say it's barely anything, and that depends on how much precision you need from your prints. But does it actually matter? Because an argument that I've heard made is that if you've got this lightweight Bowden extruder here, you don't actually need to account for that much movement. It just sort of settles into place, gravity pretty much stays the same, and it works fine. In order to try to answer that question, I printed these 2 20mm calibration cubes. They're cubes and they're 20 millimeters on a side. One of them was printed on the Sovol, one of them was printed on the Ender. And if there was some issue with like sagging of the Ender's Z-axis, then maybe this cube would come out skewed or not quite right. The Ender measured 19.91 by 20.16 by 20.14, whereas the Sovol measured 19.96 by 20.12 by 19.68. So actually the Ender did a better job on the 20mm calibration cube than the Sovol. And in fact, the Sovol had another problem called elephant's foot, where the bottom few layers of the print kind of spread out and get wider. And I actually have tried various things to fix that and have not been able to fix it yet. So in fact, the Ender did a very accurate print, and it had a higher quality print than the Sovol straight out of the box. Now, of course, I have to acknowledge that printing a 20mm cube right in the center of the bed isn't the best way to test for unlevelness or slop in the X gantry. 4 months, guys. I'm going to be a pro soon. I should have really printed like a wider thing and a taller thing, but the takeaway here is that it's not obviously a deficiency that it doesn't have a dual Z-axis. That's not a deal breaker. The print volume is another big difference between these printers. And when I reviewed the Sovol, what I said was that especially for a beginner, you're probably going to be printing smaller things, especially for FPV. Most of the things we print are smaller, and so bed size shouldn't really be like a deal breaker between 2 printers. And I guess I still stand by that, but having seen the difference like right next to each other, the bed on the Ender, just, I guess it's because I got used to the size of the bed on the Sovol. When I saw the Ender, I was like, oh, it's so much smaller. Realistically, I don't think it's going to make a difference, but I do have to acknowledge that I had that kind of gut reaction. The Ender comes with this flexible magnetic mat, and the advantage of this is that after your print's done, you can remove the whole mat and you can use it to break the thing off. That's pretty nice. Also, if you ever you can see I've damaged this by not setting my z-axis correctly, and if you damage it, it's super easy to replace or to swap out. Just peel it off. The downside of this is that I have to re-level it more often, and I think it's just because when you take it off, and when you're talking about 0.2 millimeters of clearance, then just taking it off and putting it back on can make a little bit of change in your level. Now, I have gotten good results from both of these bed surfaces, the textured glass on the Sovol and the flexible magnetic mat on the Ender. And I haven't had to do one bit of bed prep. I know there's people out there who have the whole rituals of bed prep, and I'm sure eventually I'll find a case where I need that. But for the very small, very basic prints I've been doing, TPU and PLA, no bed prep at all. But I've done some reading, and it seems to me like many people on the internet end up with a glass bed eventually, and it seems like glass beds have the advantage. So I have to say, what the Ender comes with is fine, but the Sovol, I think, is where people are going to end up with the bed surface. The good news is that a glass bed is only like a $15 or $20 upgrade, so it's not that hard to upgrade after the fact. One of the nice things about my Sovol was that it came like 95% pre-assembled. It was basically like 6 or 8 screws to put it the rest of the way together, plug in all the wires, and it was ready to go. The Creality Ender 3 Pro came less fully assembled. So the base was completely assembled, but this upright section I had to assemble myself. And it's not the end of the world. In fact, I invited a friend over. We ordered a pizza and we sat there, and it took maybe an hour and 20 minutes because we were going slow and slacking off. It wasn't that hard. But there were some extra steps in here that I'm torn because, it's like when people ask, should I buy a ready-to-fly quad or should I build my own? And you say, if you buy a ready-to-fly, you're not going to learn anything. Well, in order to put this guy together, we had to tension the belt. I didn't know how the belt went in there and how it was tensioned, so I had to learn how to get it tensioned correctly. I never would have learned that if I had only stuck with the Sovol. Another thing that we ran into was that the bearings here, the wheels, the rollers, the V-rollers, see, I'm going to be an expert soon. The V-rollers here, they were just fine on the Z-axis, but on the bed had some flex and some flop in it. And what we discovered is that there are some cam nuts on the underside that can be used to tension the V-rollers and keep the bed from doing that. That was another case where that stuff was all done for me on the Sovol, and I didn't have to screw with it. By having to screw with it on the Ender, I learned something, but at the same time, it was a step that I had to go through that I might have just rather been printing. You can't talk about the Ender 3 Pro without talking about the differences between the Ender 3 and the Ender 3 Pro, because one of the big questions that you ask if you're thinking about buying one of these is whether the Ender 3 Pro is worth the upgrade. And again, not being a super expert myself, I just did a lot of Google searching. And I found most people seem to agree that the Ender 3 Pro is worth the upgrade. The two of the biggest things about the Ender 3 Pro are that the power supply is upgraded. This is a Meanwell power supply. It is name brand, it's CE rated, and two things that means is, number one, it probably won't burn your house down, and number two, it probably won't die 2 weeks after you get it because it's a cheap Chinese piece of junk. The Meanwell power, people are like, if the Ender 3 Pro is $30 more expensive, then you're going to spend that on the power supply you're going to replace anyway, so you may as well get it. The other big difference in the Ender 3 Pro is that this Y-axis extrusion here is wider, and that gives the bed a little bit more support and a little bit less jiggle. And again, most real experts in 3D printing seem to feel that that's a worthwhile upgrade. Another area where the Ender 3 falls short of the Sovol is here in the leveling setup. The knobs, they both have these large knobs which make it very easy to make fine adjustments in the level. And in case you're new to this, yes, small changes like even just that much of a turn do make a difference in the level and can affect the quality of the print. So being able to make, you can imagine how hard it would be if that was just like a little, washer, nut or something. But the Ender 3 definitely has the weaker springs. You can see the springs just have fewer turns and the bed is just a little bit more prone to movement. And I don't know if it's the flex bed or the springs or what, but I definitely have found that I have to level the Ender 3 more often than the Sovol. Just by comparison, you can see the Sovol spring just visibly has way more turns and is way more compressed and is holding the bed way tighter. Another difference that's difficult to show here on camera is that the Ender 3 has only 4 of these rollers on the underside, 1, 2, 3, 4, whereas the Sovol has 6. And granted, the Sovol has a bigger bed, so maybe it just needs more stability, but the Sovol does have those extra rollers which help it stay a little more stable. Now, I've spent a lot of this video cataloging the technical differences between the Ender 3 Pro and the Sovol SV01. But here's the thing. None of that freaking matters. The only thing that freaking matters is the quality of the prints that you get out of them. And there is ample proof all over the internet that you can get great prints out of an Ender 3 Pro, both with traditional rigid filament like PLA and with flexible filament like TPU. There are even people claiming to run TPU on an Ender at like 30 millimeters per second. So the question is not, can you do it? How did I do? Let's answer that question. Earlier in this video, I showed you all these benchies, and I said I bet you couldn't tell which was which. Well, maybe some of you can, but this is the best looking benchy that I was able to get out of my Sovol SV01. That's how it came, right? I didn't no cleanup at all. Very little stringing, pretty good performance here on the overhang in the bow. Just, I feel like this is a pretty good print. Now, that's not due to any skill on my part. That's due to the people over on the Sovol Facebook group, and link in the video description, and my patrons over on my Discord server, where there's a 3D printing channel, who spent lots of time helping me get this dialed in. And this was the best looking benchy that I got out of the Ender 3 Pro. And I admit it's not quite as good, but it's not bad. And I got to acknowledge, because you guys are going to fill up the comments, that there are lots of people out there who are better at 3D printing than me who've got excellent results. Both of them, though, pretty freaking good. And for the record, this is the very first benchy I printed on the Sovol without tweaking the settings at all. And this is the very first benchy I printed on the Ender without tweaking the settings at all. And they both look pretty crappy. So you can get good results from both. You can get bad results from both. There are going to be some differences in how fast you can go and how much work you have to do. But overall, either of these would be a fine printer. So that brings us to the end of the video. And as always, the question, which one should you buy? And for those of you who already bought the Sovol SV01 based on my previous video, did you buy the wrong one? And I'm going to get that right out of the way. No, I don't think you did. I think both of these are great printers, and both of them are sort of the right printer for the right person at the right price point. More about that in a second. Before we finish up the video, though, I want to get one thing out of the way, and that is like 3D printer reviews. If you go watch like real pros review 3D printers, like Maker's Muse is a channel I've been watching a lot, they'll do all these test prints and they'll test the levelness of the bed and all kinds of things that I didn't even touch on. And that's because I'm not a 3D printing expert. I'm just a noob going along, learning things. And you guys, some of you apparently enjoy following along with me. So I'm trying to stay with what I'm good at. And if I run a test print, an overhang print, or a bed level print, and like it shows that it's not right, then I don't know if that's a problem with the 3D printer or just a problem with me. So before you make your purchasing decision, if you want that information, it's all out there. But this, I'm going to tell you what I can tell you. Okay. let's look at price. Let's look at the price. So here's the Sovol SV01. It runs $299. You can get it. It's got a retail of $349, but it never sells for that. It runs $299 all day, every day. I checked on Amazon as well. It's also $299 there. Over Christmas, it was on sale for $249, and it probably goes on sale for that price, not just at Christmas time. So let's say you're going to pay about $250 to $300 for the Sovol. By comparison, here is the Creality Ender 3 Pro. I've got it on Banggood here because Banggood actually is the one who sent me the one that I'm reviewing now. And before anybody jumps up, oh, it's a sponsored product. Remember, Sovol sent me the Sovol too. So, you know, I'm not playing any favorites here. Buy whichever one you want. I have an affiliate for both. So the Ender 3 Pro is $209. That's $90 cheaper than the Sovol. And if you order it from the USA warehouse, shockingly, it's even cheaper. It's usually more expensive from the USA warehouse, but there you go. USA people can get it for $188. That's $120 cheaper than the Sovol. And I also checked on Amazon because some people don't like to order from Banggood. It's about $256. So that's a little bit less of a compelling difference. I mean, for a difference of about $50, I mean, if you got the Sovol for sale on Christmas, that's about what you paid for the Sovol. And I got to say, price parity, I would take the Sovol over the Ender. The big thing that the Ender has going for it that I alluded to earlier in the review is a much, much larger user base. And that means that for people who want to just be able to look on the internet, do a Google search, or half of their friends already own one, that's a big advantage. In fact, when I assembled the Ender 3, I called one of my friends over who already had one, and I knew he would already know how to put it together. It's going to be a little harder to do that with the Sovol. But personally, just the way my personality is, I don't mind having to tweak and poke and prod and figure things out for myself. For me personally, if they're the same price, I would take the Sovol. Direct drive extruder, dual Z-axis, the glass print bed, the larger print surface, at the same price of about $250, I would take the Sovol over the Ender. But if the Ender is between, let's say, $50 cheaper, if you're buying the Ender from Amazon and you're buying the Sovol from Sovol, the Ender is like $50 cheaper. And if you're buying the Ender from Banggood, it's almost $100 cheaper. That, I mean, for $100, you could do a lot of upgrades to the Ender and maybe end up with a better printer. You're not going to be able to make the print bed larger for $100, I don't think. But you could put a glass print bed on there. You could upgrade the springs. You could even convert it to a really good direct drive extruder, maybe even a better designed extruder than is on the Sovol. You could upgrade the hot end. You could put a lot of upgrades into this for $100 and come out ahead. And then you're going to end up with potentially a better printer. A printer that's more tailored to what you want to do. You want to print flexible filament and you think direct drive is the way to go? Get a nice direct drive extruder, get an upgrade, put a second Z-axis on there. Boom, that's what you got. You want to focus more on printing PLA? Maybe update the hot end or something. Go with a glass print bed. I don't know. The Ender is kind of more of a blank slate platform. Not that it isn't okay out of the box. And that's the other thing. Because some people are going to spend $200 on the Ender and then just print with it as it is. And maybe you won't be able to go as fast as you could with a direct drive extruder, or maybe you would. But some people are just going to spend $200 and just save the extra $300 compared to the Sovol and get in. So, which one's the right one for you? Hopefully by now. See, it's not my job to tell you which one you should buy, but hopefully I've given you enough information that you can start forming an opinion on which one leans your direction. There are links to all of these products down in the video description. Thank you to Banggood for sending me an Ender 3, but there's links to other vendors as well if you prefer to use them, and you should definitely shop around because I've seen people who got an Ender 3 Pro for as little as $160. And I don't know, I mean, like, the thing is, unless you're buying from Creality, you may not be getting an actual Creality Ender 3 Pro. You may be getting like a clone, so be careful. Don't just buy the cheapest one that's out there. By the way, the one that came from Banggood came in a Creality box. I believe it was a legit Creality Ender 3 Pro. But be careful. But there's links to all of this stuff down in the video description. And don't forget to check out my Sovol video. It's not just a review of the Sovol SV01, but it is sort of a getting your feet wet into all of the, like, what is a heated bed? What is a dual Z-axis? What is a direct drive extruder? I didn't put that stuff in this video because I already discussed it in my Sovol video, and you might want to check it out. Also, I didn't discuss a whole bunch of things that these printers have in common since it didn't help you differentiate, but might be nice to know what kind of things to be looking at as you're shopping. Links to all that stuff in the video description. Thank you guys so much for watching, and looking forward to making more awesome, hopefully awesome. Do you think this was awesome content? I mean, I'm no maker's muse, but maybe give me a few years. I'll get there. I won't have his awesome haircut, though. That's going to do it for this video. Thank you guys so much for watching. I'm just going to keep saying happy flying because that's my sign off, even though these videos aren't about flying. So 3D printer guys, get into FPV. Start flying. It's awesome. Happy flying, you guys.